they would have been all over my car, coming into my windshield. Might have killed me. But I was able to get over as the car began to get over and almost hit them. And the bike rider, as I drove by, was flipping me off. Now, Richard Reeves, who does reports, camera work, also helps me drive the bus around when we go on the road. He's a long-time 18-wheeler driver, you name it, and cab driver. And I was telling the story the other day, and he ran up and said, my gosh, they challenge you. They're aggressive. And they run red lights. They cut in front of you. They get on 360. They get on major highways and get in the roads. And when they get in packs, they get even crazier, and they're getting killed like every week in Austin. And so the answer the government is saying is to shut down part of lanes, Lamar, South Congress, make you back into the parking spots causing all these wrecks. It's all about the bike riders, and that's what the news is saying. Who wins in Boston, bikes versus cars? And I'm not against bikes. I like biking. Richard likes to mountain bike. But when I bike, I get way over on the shoulder. I mean, when I'm in a car, I defensively drive. I mean, motorcyclists don't drive like this. There's something wrong with these bicyclers, and they say, hey, we're taking over. Agenda 21 is using them, telling them, hey, the road's yours. They're talking about taking highways now and giving them bike lanes. Ladies and gentlemen, the number one cause of death for police and firefighters is pulling people over or working highways. This is not fun. This is cars going 75 miles an hour killing each other. And they've got steel cages. Richard, we only got about 3 minutes, but give us your report on this, because they had another person get run over on a major highway in Austin. And of course, trains are killing people now, so they're saying get rid of cars because the trains can't stop. I mean, this is crazy.
It is crazy.
Light rail.
I drove for 30 years professionally, 20 years, 18-wheelers, 10 years driving taxi here in Austin and San Antonio. And I got to tell you, when I started driving cab, 10-plus years in taxi business, I started driving in 97, 98 with the cabs, and I've seen as the years have gone by that continually pedestrians and bicyclists just get more brazen and more neglectful about what they're doing out there.
They'll be on their phone and walk out in front of you.
That's right. We talk about texting and driving. Well, it's like recently I saw a pedestrian in downtown Austin that was messing with his smartphone. I don't know if he was texting or calling or what, but he was still walking into an intersection, and he ran right smack flat dab into a van taxi cab right there sitting there at the red light. He just walked right into it. So the bicyclists are challenging down there. Downtown especially is really bad, in South Austin, North Austin.
But they'll aggressively cut in front of you and then bug their eyes out, or they'll cut across 2 lanes. And if you look at them wrong, they'll go, F you.
Right.
And I'm like, wow, bike rage is the issue. But it's like, oh, they're little special. They're our Lord. We must do what they say.
And I'm sitting here. I love vehicles with 2 wheels. I mean, I've had motorcycles most years of my life, and I intend to have another motorcycle one day.
Somebody stole your motorcycle.
Yeah, somebody stole my motorcycle a couple years ago. Otherwise, I'd still have it. And I love bicycles. I grew up riding bikes. I love 2-wheel vehicles. But here's the rule, folks. If you're riding on 2 wheels, whether it's a bicycle or a motorcycle,
you're invisible.
Assume that nobody sees you. You've got to assume that you're invisible. Super defensive, because if a car hits you, a truck hits you, whatever, a motorized vehicle of any type hits you, who's going to win that battle in the long run? I mean, maybe you're 6 feet under, and maybe your family sues or whatever and gets some money out of it. But
that's not even the issue. Sure, they're bad drivers. They admit these bike riders are getting super aggressive.
Well, they are. And they are. And
I mean, it's part of that critical mass where they take over New York and stuff. But now it's just like, I'm going to show you. I'm going to run out in front of an 80-mile-an-hour car. That'll show you.
Right. I've experienced that myself. And there was talk on the mainstream radio here in Austin about giving the bicyclists super rights, where there's even a bigger penalty if you hit one or run over one. Well, God forbid they get those super rights, because then they'll really, who knows what levels they'll challenge us then, just driving on the streets. So it's just crazy.
But they break the laws like nothing I've seen.
Well, and I'll sit there, I'll admit, I've run my share of red lights when I'm on a bicycle or whatever, but nobody's ever had to step on a brake. Nobody's ever had to steer to avoid me. That's the difference.
Yeah, but I mean, I was on 360 a few months ago, and I was getting off at the Bee Caves exit, and we're going about 10 miles an hour down the deal. And the guy gets off, there's 2 lanes, and he just cuts in front of everyone, almost hitting him, and then stopping and then going and acting arrogant. And I'm not into road rage. I control it, but the road rage I'm seeing is these bicyclists. They think they're God. They're anti-car. It's liberals on these things. They're anti-car. They're arrogant chicken necks.
And it's like I mentioned to you the other day, the most dangerous people, whether it's drivers, bicyclists, pedestrians, motorcyclists, to me, in my book right now, the most dangerous people out there on the road are the bicyclists.
No, I mean, I see them almost hit every day. They think they're God.
Yes.
And I know when I've been on a motorcycle or a bike, I act like I'm invisible.
Well, and that's the only way to survive.
And then they complain when they get killed, Richard. Richard Reeves, thanks for popping in. Joel Skousen coming up.
We're on the march. The empire's on the...
If you just type into the search engines, The Secrets of Survival with Joel Skousen, you can watch an hour-and-a-half special report that we did about a week and a half ago that is very, very informative and popular. We're going to do a whole nother 2+ hour report that'll be out in a few months. It's going to have a lot higher production value to educate people out there. And his book, of course, is Strategic Relocation, and it's in the 3rd edition, available at Infowars.com, discounted if you want to get informed and also support the broadcast and his work. Now, he was just on last week, and I don't normally have guests on 2 weeks in a row, but I appreciate him coming on. But so much of what we talked about is now coming out in the mainstream media. Here's the Washington Times today. Russia threatens to strike NATO missile defense sites. That is one of the reports. This is unprecedented. Their head Russian chief of general staff came out and had a meeting with NATO and said, if you deploy those, that allows you to have a first strike. You hit us with nukes, we fire missiles, you shoot them down. You do that, we're going to hit your sites. And I know Joel Skousen's a big expert on what's going on with the Russians, so we'll get his take on that. Also, of course, he's a former Marine Corps fighter pilot. Amazing stories with the carrier landings and Mach 2 events and things like that as well. And maybe he'll tell us some of those on there today, but I doubt we'll have time for that. He told it in the talk we had. Also, his uncle wrote The Naked Communist, and he's the editor of World Affairs Brief and is a top expert in strategic relocation and creating secure homes. In fact, he wrote The Secure Home, the Bible on it. But again, enough of his bio. You know who he is. He joins us on the subject first. The subject first of Obama mentor wanted Americans put in re-education camps, and that came out in the federal cases. And I have that video out, dovetailed, and they wanted 25 million killed. They thought would need to be killed on those bases. And it goes on, leaked U.S. Army document outlines plan for re-education camps in America. And it says, get their Social Security numbers, have PSYOPs, find out the political dissenters. It's all in there. It's for America and also overseas. There's been a false debate about that, but I've read it myself, 300 pages, scanned over it. We have screenshots of all the subsections to give us his take on this, because we were just talking about it last week on air when he was in studio, rounding up dissidents. This is amazing because we know the camps are there, but this is confirming. They're even calling it the Stalinist or North Korean style re-education camp. This re-education, an amazing term to be using that. They don't call it conditioning or reorientation or de-radicalization. They call it re-education and re-education camps. Joel Skousen, what do you make of this?
Well, we're talking about Army Field Manual 3-39.4, and this is a revised field manual from their normal prison camp training manual that they put out to the Army. This has been revised since Abu Ghraib, so that it has, specific and carefully worded concepts about not abusing principles of prisoners and not allowing detention as
hey, Joel, your phone's a little bit muffled. I know you're on the road about to catch a plane. Are you on a hands-free?
No, I'm on a cell phone.
Do me a favor, talk right into the receiver.
Okay, how's this?
It's a little bit better. Please continue.
All right. In any case, Alex, you're exactly correct. The article that you put out and Paul Joseph Watson wrote for Infowars.com is something that everybody should see. I've read the manual, and it does, in fact, give all of the details about how the Army would implement the lockup of civilians, and it talks about displaced civilians. It's interesting when you read the whole manual, it doesn't raise alarm bells with a normal Army person, because this is the typical thing they prepare for in a combat zone. There will be civilians, there will be displaced civilians, and how you treat them. But it does give certain hints that, in fact, this is going to be used on Americans. It talks specifically about they will have to get an exception to posse comitatus and they will have to use executive power to get that exception, and they will also seek to get a congressional resolution that we are under an insurgency. And so it's very, very clear that they put legal language in there to try to justify the re-education of civilians. They do talk about psychological operations officers, how they will try to convince these dissidents about the benefits of American policies and actions. So this is clearly a document aimed at Army officers in order to not alarm them. And that's why we have to be careful to say this does not give what the government is trying to do. This is implementation to Army officers, and it's specifically written so it doesn't alert them to what the government is really up to.
Sure, it's dryly written. Most military and police called in and understood this, but one guy called in and just said, well, this is for overseas. This isn't for domestic. And I just had the feeling it was a staged call. It sounded like a psyop.
Well, clearly this is aimed domestically as well, because they do mention posse comitatus and the fact that they're going to have to get an exception. Now, of course, if you were a prisoner under that and you said, look, I've read the copy of the manual, you're supposed to, within 72 hours, give me a right of appeal. I'm to have a determination of whether or not I'm under the Geneva Convention. All that's right in your manual. You know, they'd probably just blow you off and say, we don't have that stuff in front of us, and you don't have a lawyer, and you can't do anything to us. But clearly the language is written in there not to offend the sensibilities of patriotic Army officers. They think they're simply going to be implementing something because of massive unrest, and that we have to control populations during a military operation within the borders of the United States.
Well, the point is, this didn't just pop up today. It's been a slow, incremental, across administrations, continuity of agenda towards total control. And then you've got the fact that this is set up, from what I've seen, along a Soviet model. Joel, do you agree with that? I mean, all the terms being used, re-education, loudspeaker systems, the whole way that this has been deployed and set up is exactly what came out in the federal court case with Bill Ayers when they were planning to put conservatives, libertarians, constitutionalists in giant camps and kill 25 million of us.
Well, I do agree with you that this matches very clearly both the Soviet model and and to a certain extent the Nazi Germany model, but more like the Soviet model, and even very disturbingly much like the North Korean model. And so I think this is something it has been in recent history, it has been Vietnam, Laos, and China that have used in North Korea the re-education camps to the greatest extent. These are the people that have the top expertise, including torture, which this manual does not mention. But and I think they're not going to tell the military that they're going to go back to that. But once you get in these camps, of course, there are no rights, there are no procedures. You do as I say is what they tell you.
Well, we know from Abu Ghraib and other camps in Iraq, we know from Camp X-Ray, they have the general camp and they have a special torture camp for special personnel, generally